Reckon I was 58 years old before I understood what courage costs. Not the kind they write about in dime novels, the kind that sits quiet in your chest and burns soil while the whole county watches you make a choice you can't take back. It was August of 1878. Drought had turned West Texas into a graveyard for anything green. I was headed to town for salt when I heard the buzzards circling over Merrick's fence line. Rode past once. Told myself it wasn't my business. Rode past twice. Wind carried a sound like breathing through broken glass. Third time I stopped. She was tied to the barbed wire fence, wrists bleeding where the metal cut deep. Sun had blistered her face raw. Her dress hung in tatters and the alkali dust coated her skin like ash on a corpse. I pulled my knife and cut the rope. Behind me, Clayton Merrick's voice came cold as creekstone. "That woman's mine by law, Webb." I didn't turn around, just caught her weight as the rope snapped and she collapsed into my arms. She weighed nothing, like holding a bundle of sticks wrapped in cloth. Her breath rattled shallow and hot against my chest. "You're making a mistake," Merrick said. His foreman sat a horse beside him, rifle across his saddle, both of them watching me like I was a dog that had forgotten its place. I laid her across my saddle, steadied her with one hand. My palms were slick with blood, mine or hers, couldn't tell. The barbed wire had cut through my gloves when I sawed through the rope. "Mistake's already made," I said, "and it ain't mine." I mounted up behind her and turned my horse west toward my ranch. Didn't look back. Could feel their eyes on me the whole 3 miles home, heavy as a hand on my neck. My place sat in a shallow basin where a creek used to run before the drought choked it down to mud. The house was stone and timber, built by my wife's father back in '52. Clara had died here 4 years ago. Fever took her slow while I watched and couldn't do a damn thing about it. I carried the woman inside and laid her on Clara's old bed. The quilt still smelled like sage soap even after all this time. I'd washed it once a month for 4 years, same as Clara used to do because some habits die harder than hope. She didn't wake when I cleaned the wire cuts on her wrists, didn't wake when I pressed cool water to her blistered face, just lay there breathing those terrible shallow breaths while the afternoon light crawled across the floor. I walked out to the porch and poured coffee from the tin pot. The cup was one Clara had made, hammered it out of scrap tin herself because store-bought things felt wrong in her hands. I had 7 of them left. Used a different one each day of the week. Same pattern Clara kept. Gave the days a shape when they all felt the same. The coffee was bitter. I drank it anyway and watched the sun drop toward the horizon, turning the dead grass gold. A dust trail rose in the east, rider coming fast. Doc Helena Voss pulled up 20 minutes later. She was 51, German by birth, and the only physician in 60 miles who'd treat a man regardless of what color God painted him. She swung down from her mare like she was 30 and tied off at my rail. "Moses sent word you had trouble," she said. Her accent still carried the old country in its edges. "Is she alive?" "Barely." Doc Voss brushed past me into the house. I heard her boots on the wood floor, heard the rustle of her bag opening. I stayed on the porch. Didn't trust myself to watch another woman die in that bed. 10 minutes later, she came back out, wiped her hands on a cloth, tucked it away, and sat down on the step beside me without asking. "She'll live," Doc said. "Wire cuts are deep but clean. Sun damage is bad but not fatal. Mostly she needs water and rest." "How long was she out there?" 6 hours, maybe 8. Doc's jaw tightened. "You know whose fence that was?" "I know." "And you know what her husband owed him." I looked at her. "What are you talking about?" Doc Voss pulled a folded paper from her coat pocket. "Her name is Sarah Brennan, Irish. Came here 3 months ago with her husband Patrick. He died of pneumonia 4 weeks back." She handed me the paper. "This is what Merrick's been showing around town." I unfolded it. Legal paper, official seal at the bottom, a debt contract for $800, gambling marker signed by Patrick Brennan, at the bottom a clause transferring the debt to his widow upon death. 800, I said. The words tasted like copper. "Merrick's been collecting through labor," Doc said quietly. "Public discipline, he calls it. Says the law allows debtor punishment to ensure repayment." "Law allows a lot of things that ain't right." "Yes." Doc stood, dusted off her skirts. "But right doesn't matter when you have paper and a judge in your pocket." She paused at the steps. "She wakes up, she'll scream. She thinks she's back on that fence. Be patient with her." I nodded. Doc mounted up and rode east into the gathering dark. I sat there on the porch until the stars came out. The coffee had gone cold in Clara's tin cup. I could hear the woman, Sarah, breathing through the open window, could hear the wind moving through the dead grass like something restless. In the morning, Merrick would come. He'd bring that paper and men with rifles, and he'd use the law like a noose. And I'd have to decide what a man's conscience was worth when measured against everything he had left. Inside the house, Sarah Brennan started screaming. I was through the door before the scream finished. Sarah was sitting up in bed, eyes wild, clawing at her wrists like the wire was still there. Her breath came in sharp gasps that didn't seem to reach her lungs. "You're safe," I said. Kept my distance, hands where she could see them. "No wire, no fence. You're in my house." She looked at me like I was speaking a language she'd forgotten. Her fingers kept working at her wrists, scratching the bandages Doc Voss had wrapped. I walked slow to the kitchen, filled one of Clara's tin cups with water from the pitcher, brought it back and set it on the table beside the bed, stepped away again. "Water," I said. "When you're ready." Her eyes tracked to the cup. She didn't move for a long time. Then her hand shot out and grabbed it, spilling half across the quilt before she got it to her mouth. She drank like she'd been buried in sand for a week. When the cup was empty, she lowered it slow, looked at me, her voice came out raw as scraped leather. "Why? Why what? Why did you cut me down?" I didn't have an answer that made sense, so I told her the truth. "Don't know. Seemed like the thing to do." She laughed. It was a broken sound. "The thing to do, Jesus and Mary." She set the cup down carefully this time. "You know what you've done?" "Reckon I'm about to find out." "He'll come for me, Merrick. He'll bring papers and deputies, and he'll take me back." Her hands were shaking. "And he'll make sure everyone watches what happens next. That's how he does it. Makes an example. Let him try." "You don't understand. My husband," her voice caught. "Patrick gambled away money we didn't have. When he died, the debt passed to me, $800. I'll never make that cleaning houses and taking in wash. Merrick knows it, so he collects another way. By tying you to a fence in August. By reminding me I'm property till the debt's paid." She looked at her bandaged wrists. "Law says he can. Judge Harlan signed the order himself." I stood there feeling something cold settle in my chest. Law, paper, seals, and signatures that turned human beings into livestock. "You got family?" I asked. "Anyone who could help?" "Had a brother in St. Louis. Haven't heard from him in 3 years." She pulled the quilt tighter around her shoulders. "I'm alone." "Not anymore," I said. Then wished I hadn't, because I could see the hope flicker in her eyes, and I knew what hope cost when it got crushed. They came at noon the next day, 3 riders, Merrick in the middle on a bay gelding that cost more than my ranch probably did now. On his left, his foreman, thick man named Sykes who'd broken more than a few heads for wages. On his right, Deputy Tom Walcott, wearing a tin star and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. I was waiting on the porch. Sarah was inside. I'd told her to stay away from the windows. Merrick pulled up 10 feet from my steps. He was 43, but looked younger. Tailored suit, clean-shaven, hair oiled back. The kind of man who'd never had dirt under his nails and counted it a virtue. "Webb," he said. His voice carried the educated smoothness of Eastern schools. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." "Don't recall borrowing anything from you, Merrick." The Irish woman, Mrs. Brennan. He reached into his coat, pulled out a folded document. "I have legal claim to her labor until her deceased husband's debt is satisfied. Judge Harlan has certified the contract. Would you like to see it?" He rode closer, leaned down, and held out the paper. I took it, unfolded it, slow. The contract was everything Doc Voss had said. $800, Patrick Brennan's signature clear at the bottom, the debt transferred to his widow. Judge Harlan's seal pressed into red wax at the corner. The signature was too neat, too perfect. A drunk doesn't write that steady, but that wasn't something I could prove standing on my porch. "This says labor," I said. "Doesn't say torture. Discipline is part of the contract." Merrick's voice stayed level, reasonable. "Mrs. Brennan has been uncooperative. The fence time was a corrective measure, perfectly legal." "Legal." I handed the paper back. "That word's doing a lot of work today." "The law is the law, Webb. You of all people should understand that. You wore a Ranger's star once." Merrick folded the paper, tucked it away. "Which makes this situation particularly disappointing. You're harboring another man's legal property. That's theft." Behind me I heard the door open. Sarah stepped out onto the porch. She'd put on one of Clara's old dresses, too big on her, hanging loose at the shoulders. Her face was still blistered, but her eyes were steady. "I'll go," she said quietly. "No," I said. "You won't." Merrick smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Brennan understands reality. Even if you don't. Deputy Walcott, please escort Mrs. Brennan." She stays. My hand dropped to the Colt on my hip. And you leave. Now. The smile disappeared. Merrick straightened in his saddle. You're making this much worse than it needs to be. Maybe, but she's not going back to that fence. Then you'll lose everything, Webb. Merrick's voice went cold. Your ranch, your water rights. I hold the note on this property. 30 days until foreclosure. You interfere with my legal claim, and I'll make sure you don't have those 30 days. He turned his horse. Sykes and Deputy Walcott followed. At the property line, Merrick looked back. Think about what you're willing to sacrifice for a stranger, Webb, because I promise you, it'll cost more than you have. They rode east, leaving 3 trails of dust hanging in the still air. Sarah stood beside me, holding onto the porch rail like it was the only thing keeping her upright. He means it, she whispered. He'll take everything. I know. Then why? I looked at her, looked at the bandages on her wrists, thought about Clara and the tin cups and 4 years of sitting alone on this porch waiting to die. Because some things are worth losing everything for, I said, even if I wasn't sure I believed it yet. Moses Hatcher's blacksmith shop sat at the east edge of town where the road split toward San Angelo. The building was stone and iron, built to last through hell itself. Smoke rose from the forge, even in August, because a blacksmith's work doesn't stop for heat or drought or any other inconvenience God throws at the world. I found him shoeing a mule. He was 67, but his arms still had the thickness of a man who'd spent 50 years swinging a hammer. His skin was dark as walnut, and creased deep from sun and time. He'd been born a slave in Georgia, earned his freedom, and walked west until he found a place where people needed a blacksmith more than they cared about the color of his hands. Josiah, he didn't look up from the mule's hoof. Heard you made some enemies yesterday. News travels. Always does. He drove the last nail, released the mule's leg, straightened. His back popped like green wood in a fire. You come here for advice or sympathy? Don't need sympathy. Advice might be useful. Moses walked to a water barrel, dipped a ladle, drank, offered it to me. The water was cool and tasted like iron. Merrick's got paper, Moses said. Judge Harlan's seal on it. That's a hard thing to fight. I know. And you got 30 days before he forecloses on your place. 29 now. Moses studied me. His eyes were the color of creek stones, sharp and measuring. Why you doing this, Josiah? Woman's a stranger. You don't owe her nothing. Maybe that's why. He nodded slow, like I'd said something that made sense in a language only the two of us spoke. He walked to the anvil, a massive piece of iron that had been his grandfather's, brought from Georgia in a wagon after the war. The surface was scarred from decades of hammer strikes, and along the base someone had scratched marks into the metal, 47 of them. You know what these are? Moses asked. No. Witness marks. He ran his finger along them. Old tradition from slavery days, when a man's word was all he had, and even that could be taken. So we made a ritual. Anvil oath, we called it. 3 strikes of the hammer, in front of witnesses. If 3 men stood with you after the 3rd strike, your word became law, stronger than paper, stronger than any judge's seal. 3 witnesses. Who were willing to stand public? Who knew standing might cost them everything? Moses tapped the anvil. I've done it 47 times since I came here. Helped men prove their word when the law wanted to call them liars. Never failed yet. I looked at those marks, thought about what it meant for a black man to stand against white law in Texas, even in '78. Thought about the courage it took to strike that anvil the first time, let alone 47. Would you do it again? I asked. For Sarah Brennan? Moses was quiet a long time. The forge crackled behind him. The mule shifted in its stall. Merrick banks half the businesses in this county, he finally said, including the lease on this shop. He decides I'm trouble, I lose everything I built. I know. And folks around here, they tolerate a black blacksmith because they need one, but they won't thank me for standing against a white banker's legal claim, might decide tolerance has limits. I wouldn't ask if... I'll do it. Moses cut me off. But we need 3 witnesses willing to stand after that 3rd strike. And I ain't seen that kind of courage in 20 years, Josiah. People are scared. Merrick owns their debts, their land, their futures. Fear's a powerful chain. What if we could prove the contract's forged? Moses raised an eyebrow. That signature looked forged to you? Too perfect. Man who drinks himself into $800 of debt doesn't sign his name that steady. Proving it's another matter. Moses dipped his hands in the water barrel, scrubbed the soot off. You'd need someone who understands handwriting, medical training maybe, someone who could testify to a judge that the signature's false. Doc Voss. She's one witness. You need two more. Moses dried his hands on a rag. And you need proof Merrick forged it, not just suspicion, real proof. Where would that proof be? County registry in Austin, maybe. Original property transfers, debt contracts. They're supposed to keep copies. If Merrick forged this one, maybe he's forged others. Pattern like that, even Judge Harlan couldn't ignore it. Austin's 2 days' ride. Then you better find someone willing to make that ride. Moses hung the rag on a hook. But Josiah, even if you get proof, even if we do the anvil oath, even if 3 witnesses stand, Merrick's not going to just let this go. He'll fight dirty. He'll ruin everyone who stands against him. You understand that? I do. And you're still going through with it? Don't see another choice. Moses picked up his hammer. Hefty thing, handle worn smooth from decades of use. He held it out to me. Feel the weight of that. I took it. The hammer was heavier than it looked. That's what standing costs, Moses said. You'll be swinging that weight every day for the rest of your life. Some men aren't strong enough. Some men break under it. He took the hammer back, set it beside the anvil. Question is, are you? I didn't answer. Wasn't sure I knew yet. I found Reverend Abel Corwin on the church steps, reading his Bible in the late afternoon shade. He was 62, thin as a fence post, with white hair that stuck out in all directions like he'd been struck by lightning and never quite recovered. Josiah, he said without looking up, come to confess or ask a favor? Favor. Figures. He closed the Bible, marked his place with a leather strap. I heard about the Brennan woman, heard about Merrick's visit, heard you're planning to stand against a legal contract backed by Judge Harlan himself. News travels. In a town this small, everything travels. He stood, stretched, his joints cracked like dry kindling. What do you need? Someone to ride to Austin, check the county registry for records of Patrick Brennan's debt contract, see if there are others like it. Reverend Corwin was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, not a happy smile, but the kind a man wears when he's about to do something reckless and knows it. Austin's 2 days each way. I've got circuit preaching in 3 towns this month. I cancel that, I lose those congregations' tithe. Lose the tithe, I lose my living. I know. And if I help you prove Merrick's a forger, he'll make sure every church door in this county closes to me. I know that too. Reverend Corwin picked up his Bible, tucked it under his arm. God's law doesn't need a banker's seal, Josiah, and a preacher who won't stand for what's right isn't worth the collar he wears. He walked down the steps. I'll leave at dawn. Should be back in 5 days if the weather holds. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. He looked back. We might prove Merrick's a fraud and still lose everything. That signature looked awfully convincing. Too perfect, almost. Like someone traced it careful. That's what I thought. Then let's hope I find something in Austin worth losing everything for. He walked toward the livery, Bible under his arm, leaving me standing on the church steps while the sun bled red across the western sky. Sunday came hot and still, the kind of day where the air feels thick enough to chew. I rode into town with Sarah sitting behind me on the saddle. She'd insisted on coming despite my protests, said she was tired of hiding. The market square was full, 30 ranchers and their families buying supplies, trading gossip, pretending the drought wasn't slowly killing everything they'd built. I felt their eyes on us the moment we rode in, felt the conversation stop mid-word, then start again in whispers. We tied up at the general store. Sarah kept her head down, but her back was straight. I gave her that. Inside, the storekeeper, man named C. Purdy, stood behind his counter like it was a fortress wall. His daughter swept the floor in the back, pretending not to watch. Mr. Webb, Purdy said. His voice was careful, neutral. What can I do for you? Need coffee, salt, flour if you have it. Flour's scarce. He didn't move to get anything. Expensive, too. How expensive? For you, double. He met my eyes. Merrick's put word out. Anyone does business with you pays extra. Anyone extends credit loses theirs. The words settled heavy in the silence. Sarah's hand tightened on my arm. That how it is now? I asked. That's how it is. Purdy looked almost sorry. You're a good man, Webb, but good don't pay debts. And most of us here, we're holding on by our fingernails already. Can't afford to cross Merrick. I pulled out what coins I had, counted them onto the counter. Give me what this'll buy then. Purdy scooped up the money, measured out a pitiful amount of coffee, less salt, no flour. He wrapped it in paper and pushed it across. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. We walked out. The market had gone silent, 30 people watching us like we were a curiosity at a traveling show. I felt Sarah's breathing change, quick and shallow. Then I heard the voice, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Heard Webb's gone soft over some Irish whore." It came from a young rancher named Kyle Sutton, 26, full of himself, standing with 3 of his hands near the water trough. I stopped walking. "Heard he's planning to marry her," Sutton continued. "Just wants her dead husband's land claim. That's all this is. Old man's desperate for anything he can get." Sarah's hand fell away from my arm. I could feel the heat coming off her. Shame or rage, maybe both. I turned slow, looked at Sutton. He grinned, playing to the crowd. "You got something to say to me," I said. "Say it to my face." The grin faltered, but he'd gone too far to back down now. "Just calling it like I see it. You're making a fool of yourself over a woman who brought nothing but trouble. Smart thing would be to give her back to Merrick and beg forgiveness. And if I don't, then you'll lose everything. Your ranch, your name. And for what? A stranger who'll be gone the moment something better comes along." I took 3 steps toward him. He straightened, trying to look brave. His hands were shaking, though. "Let me tell you something, boy," I said. "I've worn a star. I've killed men who needed killing and a few who probably didn't. I've watched good people die slow while bad ones prospered. And I learned a long time ago that the law and justice aren't always the same thing." I stopped 5 feet from him. "So yes, I'm standing for her, and if that makes me a fool, then I'm a fool, but at least I'll be a fool who can look at himself in the mirror." Sutton opened his mouth, closed it, looked around for support, and found none. Even his hands were studying the ground. I turned to walk away. That's when I saw the crowd parting. Merrick rode through on his bay gelding, 4 men with him this time. Not deputies, hired guns by the look of them, the kind of men who did ugly work for good wages and slept fine after. Merrick stopped in the center of the square, pulled a document from his coat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called out. His voice carried clear and cold. "I have here a notice of public accounting. Patrick Brennan died owing me $800. His widow, Sarah Brennan, has proven unwilling to settle this debt through honest labor. Therefore, under territorial law and with Judge Harlan's seal, I am calling this debt due in full." He held up the paper, same document I'd seen before, signature perfect at the bottom. "Furthermore," Merrick continued, "any person who harbors Mrs. Brennan or interferes with the legal collection of this debt will be considered an accessory to theft. I am within my rights to pursue recovery through any means necessary." He looked at me, smiled. "Mr. Webb has 30 days, 27 days now, before I foreclose on his property. He seems determined to make the situation more difficult than it needs to be." Merrick reached into his coat again. This time he pulled out a second document. "But I'm a reasonable man, so I'm giving the community a choice." He held the new paper high. "This is a petition. Anyone who signs it agrees that Mrs. Brennan should be returned to my custody to work off her debt. Anyone who signs gets favorable terms on their own loans, extended credit, reduced interest." He paused. "Anyone who doesn't sign can expect their debts called in early, their credit cut off, their business arrangements with my bank renegotiated." The silence in that square was absolute. I could hear a horse shift its weight 20 feet away, could hear Sarah breathing beside me. "You can't do that," I said. "I can. I am." Merrick dismounted, walked to a barrel someone had set up as a signing table, laid out the petition, pulled out a pen and ink. "The choice is simple. Support lawful debt collection and prosper, or support theft and suffer the consequences." He looked at the crowd. "Who wants to sign first?" For 10 seconds, nobody moved. Then Old Man Garrett, 74, owned a ranch north of mine, shuffled forward. His hands shook as he took the pen. He looked at me once, guilt written plain on his face, then signed his name. "Thank you, Mr. Garrett," Merrick said. "Your loan extension is approved." Another man stepped forward, then a woman, then 3 more. I watched them line up, watched them sign, watched my neighbors choose survival over conscience, and couldn't even blame them. They had families, children, everything they'd built hanging by threads that Merrick held in his fist. 23 people signed that petition. 23. When the last one finished, Merrick rolled up the paper, tucked it away. He walked back to his horse, mounted up. "This is your last chance, Webb," he said. "Return Mrs. Brennan by sundown tomorrow, and I'll forget this unpleasantness. Keep her, and I'll take everything you have." He turned to the crowd. "As for the rest of you, thank you for your support of law and order. The bank will remember who stood on the right side today." Then he did something I'll never forget. He pulled out the deed, Sarah's husband's contract, the one with Patrick Brennan's signature, held it up so everyone could see, and touched it to the lamp that hung from the general store post. The paper caught, curled, burned. Merrick let it fall. We watched it turn to ash on the dirt street while 30 witnesses stood frozen. "No deed means no challenge," Merrick said. "No proof of forgery, no registry copy to check against, just my word against a dead Irishman's widow." He smiled. "And we all know whose word a judge will believe." The ashes scattered in a gust of wind, gone, just like that. Sarah made a sound beside me, small and broken, like something inside her had finally snapped. Merrick and his men rode out of town, leaving us standing there, leaving the crowd staring, leaving nothing but ash and silence and the weight of knowing we'd just lost the only evidence that could save us. I turned to Sarah. Her face was empty of everything except exhaustion. "He destroyed it," she whispered. "He destroyed the only proof." I wanted to tell her we'd find another way, wanted to say Reverend Corwin might still find something in Austin, wanted to offer hope, but the words wouldn't come. Because standing there in that market square, watching my neighbors shuffle away with their heads down and their shame barely hidden, I understood what Merrick had just done. He hadn't just burned a paper, he'd burned any chance we had of fighting him with the law. Now there was nothing left but choosing how much we were willing to lose. We rode back to the ranch in silence. The sun hammered down on us, and the dust rose up in clouds that coated our throats. Sarah sat behind me on the saddle, her hands barely touching my waist, like she was afraid to hold on too tight to something that was already slipping away. When we reached the house, she slid off the horse without waiting for help and walked inside. I unsaddled the mare, brushed her down, gave her what water we could spare. By the time I finished, the sun was dropping low and the shadows stretched long across the dead grass. I found Sarah standing in the doorway to the bedroom, looking at Clara's quilt. She didn't turn when I came up behind her. "You should let me go," she said, "before you lose everything." "Already told you no." "Why?" Her voice cracked. "You don't even know me. I'm nobody, just another stranger who brought trouble to your door." I didn't answer right away, walked to the kitchen, poured water into 2 of Clara's tin cups, brought one back to Sarah. She took it, but didn't drink. 4 years ago," I said. "My wife died in that bed. Fever took her over 3 weeks. I sat right there and watched her fade and couldn't do a damn thing about it." I looked at the cup in my hand. "Clara made these cups, hammered them out of scrap tin because she said store-bought things had no soul. She made 7 of them, 1 for each day of the week." Sarah looked at the cup she was holding. "After she died, I kept using them. Same pattern she did, Monday through Sunday, over and over, gave the days shape when they all felt empty." I took a drink. The water was warm but clean. "I thought that's all I had left, routine and waiting to die. Then I cut you down from that fence and realized something." "What?" "That a man who stops choosing stops living, and I'd stopped choosing anything that mattered for 4 years. Sarah turned to face me. Her eyes were red but dry. "Choosing me will cost you this ranch, this house, these cups, everything your wife built. Maybe, but keeping you alive means something, and that's more than I've meant in a long time." She looked at me for a long moment, then she set the cup down carefully on the table and walked outside. I followed her. She was standing at the edge of Clara's garden. What was left of it? Just dead stalks and cracked earth now. The roses Clara had planted were brown skeletons, killed by the drought like everything else green in Texas. "What was she like?" Sarah asked. "Your wife. Stubborn, kind, stronger than me in most ways that mattered." I stood beside her. "She would have liked you, I think, would have cut you down from that fence before I even thought about it. I wish I could have met her." "Me too." Sarah knelt down, touched the dead earth. "Roses need water. We don't have water to spare." "I know." But she stayed there, kneeling in the dirt. "My mother had a garden in County Cork, before the famine. She used to say gardens were proof God believed in second chances. You put something in the ground and tend it, and it comes back, year after year, no matter how bad the winter was." "Your mother's still alive?" "No, died when I was 12, starvation." She stood, wiped her hands on Clara's dress. Patrick brought me here because he said America was different. Said we could build something that wouldn't get taken away by landlords or blight or bad luck. She laughed, bitter. He was wrong. He made bad choices. He did, and now I'm paying for them. She looked at me. Just like you're paying for choosing to help me. That's not fair, Josiah. Fair's got nothing to do with it. We stood there in the dying light while the wind moved through the dead garden. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. What do we do now? Sarah asked. Wait for Reverend Corwin. He might find something in Austin. And if he doesn't? I didn't have an answer for that. 2 days later, Voss came back. She rode in at dusk, her medical bag slung across her saddle. I met her at the porch. Josiah, she said, we need to talk. Inside, Sarah put coffee on while Doc Voss opened her bag and pulled out 2 pieces of paper. She laid them on the table. I visited Merrick yesterday, Doc said. Told him I was concerned about a tremor I'd noticed in his hand. Asked if he'd been experiencing any symptoms. Why would you do that? Because I needed to see him sign something. She pointed to the first paper. This is a bank receipt he signed in front of me. Notice the handwriting. There's a slight tremor in the downstrokes. Very consistent, very specific. She laid the second paper beside it. This is a copy of Patrick Brennan's signature that Merrick showed around town before he burned the deed. I borrowed it from the county clerk. Notice anything? I looked at both signatures. The tremor Doc mentioned was clear in Merrick's writing, a subtle shake that you'd miss if you weren't looking. But Patrick Brennan's signature was smooth, perfect, not a waver anywhere. A man who drinks himself into $800 of debt doesn't write this steady, I said. Exactly. And a man with a hand tremor doesn't write this smooth unless he's tracing something very carefully. Doc Voss pulled out a third paper. I did some research. Merrick takes mercury treatments for syphilis. Side effect is a persistent tremor. He's had it for at least 2 years, according to medical supply orders I found. Sarah leaned forward. So the signature is forged. I believe so, but there's more. Doc folded her hands. I made an excuse to glance at Merrick's ledger while I was in his office. Just a brief look, but I saw enough. There are at least 14 other entries that look exactly like Patrick's. Debt contracts with signatures too perfect, all from men who died or disappeared in the last 3 years. The room went quiet. Outside, the wind picked up. 14, I said. Maybe more. I couldn't see the whole book. But Josiah, if we can prove this pattern, it's not just Sarah's case anymore. It's systematic fraud. Even Judge Harland would have to act. How do we prove it? We need that ledger. And we need someone to testify that Merrick's been forging documents. Doc looked at me. Someone with medical training who can explain the tremor patterns in court. You. Me. She smiled, tight and grim. I'll lose my medical license if this goes wrong. Merrick will make sure of it, but I've taken an oath to do no harm. And what he's doing, what he did to Sarah, that's harm of the worst kind. Sarah reached across the table and took Doc Voss's hand. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We still need to get that ledger, and we need the Reverend to find proof in Austin that matches what I saw. Doc stood. But if we can gather all the pieces, the ledger, the registry records, my testimony, Moses's anvil oath, we might have a chance. Might, I said. It's better than ashes and hoping, Doc replied. After she left, Sarah and I sat at the table with Clara's tin cups between us. The coffee had gone cold, but neither of us moved to pour fresh. 14 people, Sarah said softly. 14 families he's destroyed. 15, counting yours. No, she looked at me. 16, counting you. Because even if we win, Merrick's going to take this ranch. He said 27 days. That's not enough time to fight him in court and save your home. She was right. I knew it. Had known it since the moment I cut her down. Some things are worth losing everything for, I said again. This time, I believed it. The whispers started the next morning. I heard them when I rode into town for supplies. What little I could buy with what little credit anyone would still extend me. They followed me, from the livery to the general store to the water trough. Webb's lost his mind. Gonna lose everything over some woman. Merrick's right. It's theft, plain and simple. I ignored them, let the words slide past like wind through dead grass, but by the time I tied up at the general store, the whispers had turned to something harder. 3 men stood by the water trough. Ranchers I'd known for years, One of them, Jack Holloway, stepped forward as I approached. "Josiah," he said. His voice was careful, like he was talking to a spooked horse. "We need to speak plain." "Then speak. You're making this hard on everyone. Merrick's called in 2 loans already. Said more are coming if the community doesn't maintain order." Holloway glanced at his companions. "We're asking you, as neighbors, to return the woman. Do the right thing." "I am doing the right thing." "The legal thing, then. She's not your responsibility. You don't owe her anything." That's where you're wrong," I said. "Damn it, Josiah." Holloway's frustration boiled over. "You had a good life here. Respect. People looked up to you. Now you're throwing it away for—" He stopped himself. "For what? Say it." He didn't, just shook his head and walked away, the other 2 following. I bought what I could and rode back. But the words stayed with me, heavy as stones in my pockets, because part of me wondered if they were right. If I was a fool throwing away everything for a stranger who'd be gone the moment the dust settled. Then I got home and saw Sarah kneeling in Clara's garden with a bucket of water. She'd carried it from the well, 50 yards uphill in the heat. The bucket was only half full now. Most of it spilled or evaporated, but she was using what was left to water the dead rose stalks, one careful cupful at a time. "What are you doing?" I asked. She looked up. Her face was flushed from the heat, sweat darkening her dress. "Your wife planted these. They deserve a chance?" "They're dead, Sarah. Maybe, but maybe not." She poured another cup of water onto the roots. "My mother used to say, you can't always see what's alive underground. Sometimes you just have to water it and wait." I stood there watching her pour the last of the water, watched her sit back on her heels, hands dirty, breathing hard from the effort, and I knew, right or wrong, wise or foolish, I'd made the only choice I could live with. Doc Voss came back 3 days later, riding hard. She dismounted before her horse had fully stopped and strode onto the porch. "I got it," she said. Her eyes were bright with something between fear and triumph. "Got what?" She pulled a folded paper from inside her coat, opened it on the porch rail. It was covered in numbers and names, a page torn from a ledger. "How—" "Don't ask questions you don't want answered." She pointed at the entries. 14 forged debt contracts. 14 dead men's signatures. All too perfect. All dated within the last 3 years. Her finger moved down the page. "And look at this." At the bottom, in different ink, was a notation. "New Orleans, $22,000 due by September." "That's next month," I said. "Merrick's desperate. He's been forging these contracts to consolidate land for a rail company sale. Needs 12 properties to make the deal work. Your ranch is number 12. Doc folded the paper. "He's not collecting Sarah's debt because he cares about $800. He's doing it to scare other ranchers into selling cheap. Wants them to think he'll destroy anyone who resists." Sarah had come out onto the porch. "So this was never about Patrick's gambling." "Your husband probably never even signed that contract. Merrick forged it after he died, knowing you couldn't fight back." Doc looked at me. "The question is, can we prove it before your foreclosure date?" "How many days left?" 21. "And Reverend Corwin?" "Should be back from Austin tomorrow or the next day." Doc tucked the ledger page away. "But Josiah, Merrick knows something's wrong. His wife saw me looking at that ledger. She didn't say anything, but her eyes did. He's gonna know it's missing." As if summoned by the words, we heard horses, 5 riders coming fast from the east, dust rising behind them like smoke. Merrick led them. His 4 hired guns flanked him, rifles across their saddles. They pulled up at this property line, close enough to talk, far enough to avoid immediate violence. "Webb," Merrick called out. "I believe Dr. Voss has something that belongs to me." Doc's hand went to her coat pocket. I stepped in front of her. "Don't know what you're talking about," I said. "A page from my ledger, taken without permission." Merrick's voice was cold, precise. "That's theft. I could have the marshal arrest her right now." "Then do it. Let a judge see what's on that page." Merrick smiled. "You think Judge Harland will believe a German woman doctor over a banker with 20 years of community trust? You think he'll accept a stolen document as evidence?" He shook his head. "You're more desperate than I thought." "Maybe I am, but desperation has a way of making things clearer." "Does it?" Merrick's hand rested on his saddle horn, casual and confident. "Let me make something clear to you, Webb. That ledger page proves nothing without the full book for context. Any lawyer will argue it's incomplete, misleading, possibly even fabricated by someone with an agenda. He was right. I could see it on Doc's face, the realization that we'd risked everything for evidence that might not hold up in court. But I'm a reasonable man, Merrick continued. So here's my offer. Return that page, return Mrs. Brennan, and I'll extend your foreclosure date by 60 days. Give you time to arrange finances, find a buyer. You'll lose the ranch eventually, but at least you'll walk away with something. And if I refuse, then I accelerate the foreclosure. You have until Sunday to vacate the property. 3 days, Webb. He straightened in his saddle. And Dr. Voss, I'll make sure every patient in this county knows you're a thief. You'll never practice medicine west of the Mississippi again. He turned his horse. 3 days. After that, I'll bring the marshal and take what's legally mine. All of it. They rode off, leaving dust and the weight of impossible choices hanging in the air. Doc Voss pulled out the ledger page, looked at it. He's right. Without the full ledger, this proves nothing. Any judge will dismiss it. Then we get the full ledger, I said. How? He'll have it locked in his safe now, guarded. I don't know yet. I looked at Sarah. She was staring after Merrick's dust trail, her jaw set in a way I was learning meant she was thinking hard about something dangerous. There might be a way, she said quietly. What way? She turned to me. Merrick wants me back, right? Says I owe him labor until the debt's paid. You're not going back to him. What if I volunteer? Tell him I'm ready to settle the debt honestly. Ask for the contract to review the terms. Her eyes were steady. If I can get into his office, I can find where he keeps the ledger. Absolutely not. It's the only way, Josiah. He won't suspect me. I'm just a defeated widow accepting reality. You and Doc Voss are threats. I'm not. He'll hurt you. Maybe, but if we don't do something, he wins anyway, and 14 other families stay under his thumb, thinking they deserved what happened to them. Doc Voss was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, If Sarah can get the location of the ledger, even just confirm where it's kept, I might be able to create a distraction, get Merrick out of his office long enough for someone to retrieve it. This is insane, I said. Yes, Sarah agreed. But you cut me down from a fence when it was insane to do that. You gave me your last money when it was insane to do that. You stood against your whole community when it was insane to do that. She took my hand. Let me do one insane thing too. I wanted to say no. Wanted to lock her in the house and face Merrick alone, the way I'd faced every other hard thing in my life. But her hand was steady in mine. And I remembered what Moses had said about the weight of standing, about how some people break under it. Sarah Brennan wasn't breaking. All right, I said, but I'm not letting you go in there alone. That night, I sat alone on the porch while Sarah slept inside. The stars were hard and bright overhead, indifferent to the struggles of men trying to do right in a world that punished them for it. I held one of Clara's tin cups, empty now. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but I hadn't moved to pour fresh, just sat there turning the cup in my hands, feeling the dents and imperfections where Clara's hammer had shaped the metal. 4 years I'd been sitting on this porch. 4 years of watching the sun rise and set over land that was slowly dying. 4 years of using these cups in the same pattern, Monday through Sunday, because it was the last thread connecting me to a woman who'd made living feel like something more than just not dying. Now that thread was fraying. 3 days until Merrick took it all. 3 days until everything Clara built turned to dust in a banker's ledger. And for what? For a woman I'd known 2 weeks. For a stranger who'd brought nothing but trouble and loss. I heard the door open behind me. Thought it was Sarah, but the footsteps were wrong. Heavier. I reached for the Colt on my hip. Easy, Josiah. Moses' voice came from the shadows. Just me. He stepped into the starlight, his blacksmith's hands hanging loose at his sides. He climbed the steps slow, like a man who'd walked a long way and wasn't sure of his welcome. It's past midnight, I said. I know. He sat down beside me, uninvited but not unwelcome. Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about that anvil oath I offered you. Having second thoughts. About 100 of them. He was quiet for a moment. You know what happens to a black man who stands against a white banker in Texas, Josiah? Even in '78, even after the war, even after everything we fought for. I know. Do you? Because I've built something here. 20 years of hammer and iron, and proving to white folks that I'm useful enough to tolerate. 20 years of keeping my head down, and my voice quiet, and my opinions to myself. He looked at his hands. And you're asking me to throw that away, to stand up in front of the whole county and strike that anvil 3 times, to make myself a target. I never asked. You did. The moment you cut that woman down, you asked, because that's what standing does. It asks the people around you to stand too, and if they don't, they have to live with knowing they could've and didn't. We sat in silence. The wind moved through the dead grass, making sounds like whispers. My grandfather, Moses said finally, died in Georgia, beaten to death for teaching other slaves to read. They hung his body from a tree as a warning, left it there 3 days. His voice was steady but low. My father took me to see it. I was 7. He said, "Regirsite, remember this. Remember what standing costs, and when your time comes, you decide if you're strong enough to pay it." "And are you?" Moses looked at me. His eyes were old and tired and clear. "Don't know yet. That's why I'm here, to see if I can talk you out of this fool thing so I don't have to find out." "Can't be talked out of it." "Figured." He stood. "Then I guess I'm in. Sunday morning, church steps. I'll bring the anvil and the hammer. We'll do this right." "Moses, don't thank me. Don't apologize. Just make sure it matters." He walked down the steps. "Because if we lose, if we stand up there and strike that anvil and nobody comes, we'll have given them permission to destroy us. You understand that?" "I do." "And you're still going through with it. Don't see another choice." Moses nodded once. "Then I'll see you Sunday." He disappeared into the darkness, leaving me alone with Clara's tin cup and the weight of knowing I'd asked too much of too many people. Behind me, the door opened again. This time it was Sarah. She came out wrapped in one of Clara's shawls, her feet bare on the porch boards. "You can still walk away," she said. "I release you, right now. You don't owe me anything." "Already had this conversation." "I know, but I need to say it again." She sat down beside me. "Tomorrow I'm going to Merrick's office. I'm going to smile and bow my head and play the defeated woman. And there's a chance, a good chance, he'll see through it, that he'll hurt me or kill me or lock me somewhere you can't reach. I won't let, you can't stop it, not if I choose to go." Her hand found mine in the darkness. "So I need you to understand something. If this goes wrong, if I don't come back, I need you to know it was my choice. Not yours, mine." "Sarah, my whole life, men have made choices for me. My father, my husband, Merrick, even you, cutting me down from that fence." She squeezed my hand. "This is the first time I get to choose. Win or lose, live or die, it's mine. Do you understand?" I looked at her, at the strength in her eyes that I'd mistaken for fragility, at the steel in her spine that 2 weeks ago had been bent under wire and sun. "I understand," I said. "Good." She let go of my hand. "Now tell me about your wife. Really tell me, because if I'm going to do this, I want to know what kind of woman made cups like these." So I told her about Clara's laugh, about the way she hummed while she worked metal, turning scrap into something useful and beautiful, about the roses she planted even when everyone said the soil was too poor, about the morning she died when she took my hand and said, "Don't you dare stop living just because I did." Sarah listened without interrupting. When I finished, she picked up the tin cup I'd been holding. "She would have liked me," Sarah said. "She would have loved you." "How do you know?" "Because you're doing what she would have done, standing when it costs everything, choosing the hard right over the easy wrong." I took the cup back. "That's what she taught me. Took me 4 years to remember it." Sarah stood. "I'm going to bed. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." She paused at the door. "Josiah?" "Yeah." "Thank you for cutting those ropes, for giving me a choice." Her voice caught. "For reminding me I'm more than what men like Merrick say I am." Then she was gone, leaving me alone with the stars and the cup and the knowledge that in less than 48 hours, everything would either be saved or lost. I poured fresh coffee, sat on that porch until dawn broke pale and uncertain over the eastern hills. Sunday was coming, and with it, the anvil's ring. Saturday morning, Sarah rode into town alone. I'd argued against it until I was hoarse, but she'd been right about one thing. Merrick wouldn't suspect a defeated widow coming to negotiate her surrender. I watched her go from the porch, my hands gripping the rail hard enough to leave splinters. Doc Voss stood beside me, her medical bag at her feet. "If she's not back by noon," I said, "I'm going in." "Give her until 2. She needs time to search his office, find where the ledger's kept." Doc's voice was steady, but her hands weren't. "I've arranged for Merrick's wife to have a sudden medical emergency at 1 o'clock. That should pull him away long enough. And if it doesn't, Then we improvise. 1 o'clock came, then 2, then 3. I was saddling my horse when I saw the dust trail, single rider coming fast. My hand went to my colt before I recognized Sarah's borrowed mare. She pulled up hard, breathing like she'd run the whole way herself. Her face was flushed and her hands shook as she dismounted. "I found it," she said. "He's on his little ledger. He keeps it in a safe behind his desk." Combination written inside his pocket watch. The arrogant bastard showed it to me, bragging about his father's watch. "Did he hurt you?" "No. He was kind. Offered me tea. Said he admired my strength in accepting reality." Her voice dripped with disgust. "He's planning to make an example of you tomorrow at church. Said the whole county needs to see what happens to men who defy lawful authority." Doc Voss stepped forward. "Did you see inside the ledger?" "Yes. When his wife's emergency pulled him away, I opened the safe. 47 forged contracts, Josiah. 47 families he's destroyed over 3 years." She pulled out a scrap of paper. "I copied 5 names, men who died or disappeared right after signing over their land." I took the paper, recognized 3 of the names, good men, honest men, all dead now, their families scattered or broken. "Tomorrow," Sarah said, "he's bringing Judge Harlan to church, plans to have you arrested for theft and harboring stolen property. He'll foreclose on your ranch right there in front of everyone." "Then tomorrow we show everyone what he really is," I said. Sunday morning came cool and still, the kind of day that feels like the world's holding its breath. Moses arrived at dawn with his anvil loaded on a wagon. The massive block of iron rang like a bell when he set it down on the church steps. 47 witness marks scratched into its base, each one a story of courage purchased at terrible cost. He laid his hammer beside it. The handle was worn smooth from his grandfather's hands, his father's hands, his own. 3 generations of men who'd stood when standing meant risking everything. "You ready for this?" Moses asked. "No, but I'm doing it anyway. That's the only kind of ready that matters." People started arriving at 9. 30 ranchers and their families, drawn by word that something important was happening, that Merrick was making his move against Webb, that there'd be justice, or at least a good show. They gathered in clusters, talking low, watching Moses's anvil like it was a snake coiled to strike. Merrick arrived at 9:30. Judge Harlan rode beside him, looking uncomfortable in his formal coat despite the heat. 6 hired guns flanked them. The deputy, Tom Walcott, brought up the rear, his star catching the morning light. Merrick dismounted at the church steps, looked at the anvil, looked at Moses, looked at me. "What's this circus, Webb?" "No circus, just a man making his stand." "With an anvil?" Merrick's laugh was cold. "You think some primitive tradition is going to change the law? Judge Harlan has the foreclosure papers. Deputy Walcott has an arrest warrant for Mrs. Brennan. This ends today, one way or another." "You're right about that," I said. Moses stepped forward. His voice carried clear across the gathered crowd. 47 times I've performed the anvil oath," he said. 47 times I've helped men prove their word when the law tried to call them liars. It's an old tradition, older than this town, older than your banks and your papers and your judges." He picked up the hammer. "Here's how it works. I strike this anvil 3 times. If 3 witnesses stand with the accused after the 3rd strike, his word becomes law, stronger than paper, stronger than any seal." "That's not legal," Judge Harlan said. "No," Moses agreed. "It's older than legal. It's just." He raised the hammer. "Josiah Webb stands accused of theft, of harboring stolen property, of defying lawful authority." Moses looked at Merrick. "But I say he stands accused of something else, of remembering what most of us forgot. That law without conscience is just tyranny in fancy clothes." The hammer came down, the anvil rang, the sound rolled across the churchyard like thunder, clear and bright and impossible to ignore. 47 marks sang in harmony with the 48th. Nobody moved. Moses raised the hammer again. "Second strike for the men who chose courage over comfort, for the ones who stood when standing meant losing everything." The hammer fell. The anvil rang again, deeper this time. The sound echoed off the church walls, off the faces of 30 ranchers who suddenly couldn't meet each other's eyes. Still nobody moved. I stood there alone, facing Merrick and his guns, and his judge, and his certainty that money always wins. Stood there knowing I'd asked too much, that Moses had risked everything for nothing, that in 5 seconds when no one came forward we'd have given Merrick permission to destroy us completely. Moses raised the hammer a 3rd time. "Final strike," he said. His voice was steady, but I could hear the fear underneath, for the ones brave enough to witness. The hammer hung at the top of its arc, suspended like time itself had paused to watch what happened next. Then it fell. The anvil rang, clearest of all. The sound rolled out across that dusty churchyard and hung in the air like a question that demanded an answer. For 3 seconds, nothing. Then a boot scraped on gravel. Old man Garrett, 74, the first one to sign Merrick's petition, stepped forward. His hands shook, but his back was straight. "I stand with Webb," he said. Another boot scraped. Jack Holloway, who'd called me a fool 3 days ago, moved to stand beside Garrett. "I stand with Webb." Then another, then 5 more. Then the floodgates opened. They came forward one by one, ranchers who'd signed Merrick's petition, shopkeepers who'd denied me credit, neighbors who'd called me crazy. They formed a line behind me, 30 deep, while Moses's anvil still hummed with the third strike's resonance. Merrick's face drained of color. Judge Harlan shifted in his saddle, suddenly looking very small. "This doesn't change anything," Merrick said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "I still have the law." "You have paper," Moses interrupted. "We have witnesses, and out here that's always been the stronger claim." I stepped forward. "Now, let me tell you about your paper, Merrick. About the 47 forged contracts in your ledger. About the 14 men whose signatures you traced after they died. About the $22,000 you owe gamblers in New Orleans." Merrick's hand went to his coat. His hired guns tensed. "Shoot me, and you'll have to shoot all 30 of these witnesses," I said. "Think Judge Harlan wants that on his conscience?" Doc Voss pushed through the crowd. She held up the stolen ledger page. "I have proof," she called out. "Medical evidence that Clayton Merrick's handwriting shows a tremor from mercury treatments. Evidence that every signature in his debt ledger is too perfect. Traced, not written. Evidence of systematic fraud." "That page was stolen," Merrick started. "And Reverend Corwin has the county registry records from Austin," I said. 47 original contracts that don't match your forged versions. He'll be here within the hour." It wasn't quite true. Reverend Corwin was still 2 hours out, and we weren't sure what he'd found. But Merrick didn't know that. His hand fell away from his coat. His shoulders sagged. "Judge Harlan," he said, his voice thin, "are you going to allow this mockery?" "I'm going to examine the evidence," Judge Harlan said carefully. He dismounted, took the ledger page from Doc Voss. His eyes widened as he read. "Mr. Merrick, I think you and I need to have a conversation. In private." "I don't—" "Now, Mr. Merrick." Deputy Walcott stepped forward. His hand rested on the butt of his pistol. "Best do what the judge says." Merrick looked at his hired guns. They looked at 30 witnesses and decided their wages weren't worth massacre. One by one, they turned their horses and rode away. Merrick stood alone. "This isn't over," he said to me. "I'll fight this. You'll hang," Old Man Garrett said quietly. "Or rot in prison. Either way, you're done." They led Merrick away, Judge Harlan on one side, Deputy Walcott on the other. His protests faded into the distance. The crowd stood silent for a long moment. Then Moses walked to his anvil and scratched a 48th mark into the base. "Witness given," he said. "Justice served." One by one, the ranchers came forward, shook my hand, apologized for their fear, thanked me for standing. I barely heard them. Just kept looking for Sarah in the crowd until I finally spotted her by the church door, watching everything with tears running down her face. I walked to her. She grabbed my hand like she was drowning, and I was solid ground. "It's over," she whispered. "Not yet," I said. "Still got to wait for Reverend Corwin. Got to make sure the evidence holds. Got to—" She kissed me. Right there in front of God and 30 witnesses and Moses' satisfied grin. When she pulled back, she said, "It's over. The standing part anyway. Now comes the living." And damn if she wasn't right. Reverend Corwin arrived 2 hours later with a satchel full of registry documents from Austin. Every one of them proved what we'd suspected. Merrick's contracts were forgeries, his signatures traced, his claims built on lies that crumbled the moment someone bothered to look. Judge Harlan called an emergency session right there on the church steps, read through the evidence with the whole county watching. By sunset, he'd nullified 47 debt contracts and issued a warrant for Merrick's arrest on charges of fraud, forgery, and theft. The bank was seized, Merrick's assets frozen. The New Orleans creditors arrived 3 days later and discovered he'd already spent the money he owed them on land purchases, hired guns, and bribes to keep Judge Harlan looking the other way. They took him back to Louisiana in chains. I heard later he got 15 years. Died in prison after 6, his syphilis finally catching up with him. 14 families got their land back, got their names cleared, got their dignity restored. Sarah's husband's debt vanished like smoke. Turned out Patrick Brennan had never signed anything. Merrick had forged the whole contract after he died, Betting a widow couldn't fight back. My ranch stayed mine. The foreclosure notice was burned, same as Merrick had burned that fake deed. Moses's shop thrived. People came from 3 counties over to see the anvil with 48 witness marks. To hear the story of the day, 30 men found their courage and stood against a banker who thought money made him untouchable. Doc Voss never lost her license. In fact, her practice grew. Turned out people respected a doctor who'd risk everything to do what was right. As for me and Sarah, we stayed. Not married. Didn't need paper after everything we'd been through. But we stayed. Fixed up the ranch together, planted new fence posts, mended what the drought had broken, and those roses. 3 weeks after the anvil oath, I came out to the porch one morning and saw green pushing through the dead stalks. Sarah had been watering them every day, one careful cup at a time, using water we probably should have saved for the cattle. But she'd been right. You can't always see what's alive underground. Sometimes you just have to water it and wait. By October, 3 roses bloomed, red, white, and yellow. Clara's varieties, the ones everyone said were too delicate for West Texas soil. Sarah picked the yellow one and brought it inside, put it in one of Clara's tin cups filled with water, set it on the kitchen table where the morning light caught it just right. For her, Sarah said, for making a man who knew how to stand. I looked at that rose, looked at Sarah's hands, still scarred from the wire, looked at my own hands, marked the same way. You think she'd approve? I asked. You being here, me? I think she'd be glad you remembered how to live. Maybe she was right. We sat on the porch that evening, same as I'd done alone, for 4 years, but this time, there were 2 tin cups steaming between us, 2 voices in the silence, 2 people who'd learned that standing costs everything and nothing all at once. In the distance, I could hear Moses's hammer ringing on his anvil, steady and sure, the way it had been for 3 generations, the way it would be for 3 more, if we taught the next ones right. A mourning dove called from the dead cottonwood by the creek. I hadn't heard one in months, thought maybe they'd left for good, but there it was, calling in the dusk like it had always been there, just waiting for someone to listen. Sarah reached over and took my hand. Her grip was strong, steady. What do we do now? She asked. I thought about that, about Clara's cups and Moses's anvil and roses that bloomed in impossible soil, about 30 men who'd found courage when they thought they'd lost it, about a woman who'd been tied to a fence and chose to stand instead of break. We water the roses, I said. We keep the cups clean. We remember what standing cost us. I looked at her, and we don't waste it. She smiled, not a big smile, just a flicker at the edges, but it was enough. The mourning dove called again, and we sat there on that porch, watching the sun drop below the western hills, 2 scarred people who'd learned that justice isn't something you find in ledgers or courtrooms or bankers' offices. It's something you build. One choice at a time, 1 cup of water on dead roots, 1 hammer strike on an anvil that's seen 48 men stand when standing meant losing everything. Some choices define a man, but it's the living after the choice that defines a life. Reckon I'm an old man now, telling stories on a porch while the sun sets slow over land that's seen its share of trouble and grace. Sarah's inside making supper. Can smell the cornbread from here, mixed with the sage that still grows wild by the creek. Those roses bloom every spring. 32 years now, and counting. Red, white, and yellow, just like Clara planted them. Just like Sarah saved them with water we couldn't spare, and faith we didn't know we had. Moses died 5 years back, peaceful, in his sleep with his grandson beside him. That anvil sits in the county museum now. 73 witness marks on its base, each one a story of someone who stood when standing cost everything. People still talk about that Sunday. About the day 30 men found their courage on church steps while a blacksmith's hammer rang out 3 times. They tell it to their children, their grandchildren. Turn it into something bigger than it was, which is how legends get made, I suppose. But I was there. I remember. Remember the fear in Moses's eyes when he raised that hammer. Remember the silence after the 3rd strike, when I thought we'd lost. Remember old man Garrett's boot scraping on gravel, and then another, and another, until courage became contagious. Remember Sarah's kiss, right there in front of God and everybody. Law's a rope, you see. Depends on who's holding it. That day, we took the rope back. Proved that witness is stronger than paper, that community is stronger than money, that sometimes, not always, but sometimes, justice wins. Ain't about being a hero, never was. Heroes are for dime novels and campfire tales. It's about making a choice when the easy thing is to look away, about standing even when your knees shake, about watering dead roses because you believe in second chances, about knowing that some things, dignity, conscience, the kind of love that shows up with a tin cup of water, Some things are worth more than all the land and money in Texas. I learned that at 58 years old. Cutting a woman down from a fence in August heat took me long enough. But some lessons are worth the wait. Now, I don't know what you'd call that. Courage, maybe, or foolishness, or just being too stubborn to quit when quitting made sense. Call it what you want. I call it living.